Good morning. Thank you guys for coming. I think we're going to have some other people trickling in as we go, but welcome to number 15. If you haven't been here before, check it out. Thank you to Spencer Franck, owner-founder, who's up there, for hosting us. Make sure you get some lunch afterward at Last Place, which is downstairs, or you can go around the corner. It's right behind us. I'm pointing down there on Washington Street. All right, so many of you, I see a lot of familiar faces, would have been at our first set of public meetings back in May. And we've talked to dozens and dozens and dozens of people, had several stakeholder meetings and expert panels, and we have gathered lots of good information. And we're going to be sharing with you what we think our initial set of recommendations are for the 2023 downtown strategy. Buckle up, you're going to hear lots of good stuff. I'm going to turn the mic over to Barry, who's going to walk through all the things we've heard about, and hopefully this sounds good to you, and we are going to be looking for your feedback when we are done. So, without further ado, Barry Alberts. You're going to walk around me.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, Rebecca. Can everybody hear me okay? Great. So, as Rebecca said, we've talked to a lot of people. We think we're heading in the right direction. We really want to make sure today that we get your feedback to see if this is the groundwork for the next 10 years. And as we talked about at the first meeting, this is not a plan in terms of here's where a hotel should go, or here's where an office building should go, or a residential building. It's a strategy. It's a series of initiatives that we think should guide the public sector, the private sector, people who are investing, people who are stakeholders of downtown over the next 10 years. So we'll talk a lot about principles, about strategies, about things that we think make sense. We're not going to have a lot of pretty pictures. There's a few conceptual renderings, but this is really about whether these 10 or 12 strategic initiatives make sense for downtown over the next 10 years or so. And as Rebecca said, we're coming out of a difficult time in terms of the pandemic. Lots of discussions about what downtowns are going to look like post-pandemic. We're now a few years down the road, so certain trends that we weren't quite sure if they were going to be permanent or not are starting to come into focus. But there's still a lot of uncertainty. So being flexible, being able to adapt is really critical. We wanted to make sure that we understood that, we did understand that downtown's not doing this alone in terms of Louisville. Every downtown is struggling, trying to figure this out. So we started by trying to get as much information from experts from the national scene as to what's happening around the country. And those of you who may have seen or participated or listened to our first webinar heard 4 really good presentations and speakers discussing post-pandemic trends. And we're not going to go through all of these takeaways, but there were certain consensus trends that are coming out of this. The major one being downtowns post-pandemic are not looking like downtowns pre-pandemic, particularly related to office workers, and that cities and downtowns that are only focused primarily on office employment are going to be dinosaurs, as somebody said. That really having a 24/7 city with lots of different activities is really important. And as David Downey said, the public realm, which we'll talk about a lot today, is becoming more and more important as an economic development strategy for getting people to come downtown. When we heard Mallory speak, she began to talk about the importance of not just a variety of uses downtown, but getting more people living downtown. And that's a trend that we're going to be talking about a lot during the course of this presentation. We do have a housing specialist, probably the leading urban housing specialist in the country, Laurie Volk of Zimmerman Volk. And the points that she made were really, really relevant to our residential situation downtown. One is that residential is and must become much more of a catalyst for downtown. So in the past, restaurants, for example, downtown were primarily, the business was primarily office workers. Now, in fact, that's not the case. And for restaurants to be successful and to thrive downtown, having more of a residential market serving those restaurants, commercial spaces, retail is becoming more important. The other thing, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, is that just having more housing is a good thing, but we need a wider range of housing styles, a range of housing affordability, so that anybody that wants to live downtown has a place or an opportunity or an option to live downtown. And then the fourth speaker, James Lima, was, I don't want to say the most interesting, but certainly talked about a different way of looking at the public realm. And the fact that placemaking, which has always been a component of our downtown and downtowns across the country, is not anymore what he termed a soft issue. Yes, it would be nice to have an attractive downtown, but for people that are now having choices or have choices as to whether they're coming downtown to live, coming downtown to play, coming downtown to visit, and coming downtown to work, having a vibrant economy, having a vibrant downtown is really important. And that last point about having a choice. So in the past, there was obviously a lot of focus on bringing new businesses downtown. And the assumption or the situation was you bring new businesses and they bring employees, and those employees activate downtown. Well, now, even if there are new businesses downtown, those employees have a choice as to whether they come to the office at all, whether they come down 1 or 2 days a week, whether they come 5 days a week. And the environment that is created downtown, the public realm, the creativity, is there a reason for somebody to come downtown? Because it's a more creative place than your bedroom, or the coffee shop on Frankfurt Avenue. And the concept of social infrastructure, which is sounds like a new concept, but it's really an old concept. A vibrant place is becoming more and more important. And if you look at the quote here, capital follows people. In the past, capital followed businesses. Now, if we don't have a place where people, individuals want to be, we're not going to have a thriving downtown. So that last point, the point about social infrastructure and how downtown creates that environment, was so interesting and so important that we created a second webinar focused solely on that. And these webinars are on the website still, the Downtown Partnership website. So if you didn't participate or listen to them, you have an option to do that. So what does all this mean? We hear a lot about the what somebody called the urban doom loop for downtown. No, downtowns are dead. Nobody's coming downtown anymore. Well, not everybody believes that, and hopefully people in this room don't believe that. And I thought it was interesting that one expert, and we've seen a lot of us have seen the data on cell phone tracking and how horrible the trends are. They're not that horrible. And one of the concepts is that if we can create a place that is active around the clock, 24/7, and have the right kind of uses, the right mix, downtowns will come back. They'll look a little bit different, but they will come back, and we have an opportunity in Louisville to do that. So what were the takeaways? 4 major takeaways. One is that office space is still important, but downtowns must become mixed-use areas. And just thinking about downtowns as the central business district is an outdated concept, and we need to really focus and embrace a wider mix of uses. Downtown as a residential neighborhood, is much more important, not just individual residential buildings, but residential neighborhoods, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Downtowns need to be attractive and desirable for those who choose to live downtown or be downtown or work downtown. And this concept of choice, that everybody now coming downtown, whether you're working or visiting or living here, has a choice about whether you or they want to be there, and we need to make that choice as compelling as possible in terms of our downtown. And the last point, that the public realm, the quality of our space, is not just a nice thing to have, but it's a driving economic development force, not just for people who live in Louisville, but for people who are working now in Boston and San Francisco and Los Angeles and Chicago and New York. that are now able to live somewhere else and still keep those jobs. And places like Louisville that have much more affordable housing, it's much more accommodating to families, have a good park system, and has a vibrant downtown are cities that can attract more talent, even if those people are still working in larger cities. So, as Rebecca said, we spent a lot of time talking to lots of people, lots of stakeholders, and the comments we heard were pretty universal in terms of common themes. First one being we do have a lot of current challenges downtown: safety, homelessness, lack of office workers, deferred maintenance, which came up over and time again. But there are things that we need to work on, and we've needed to work on for a while. Our streets are still focused on cars, not pedestrians. We need more residential. We're not well connected to the different parts of downtown. We're not particularly bike friendly. We have a great waterfront park. It doesn't connect real well to downtown. Lots of these things that we all know about, but it was important for us to put that in together and see what the consensus really was. And a couple of things came out of that. One is that most people, or a lot of people, said, of course, it seemed like downtown was thriving pre-pandemic, and we've taken a big step backwards. And while that's true, we have taken a pause or a step backwards. Another common theme was, well, maybe we weren't really doing all that great. And in fact, downtown was getting better, but there were things that we weren't focused on as much as we should. Now we have an opportunity to revisit our approach to downtown, which I thought was an interesting, it's a positive spin on what we're dealing with now, but an understanding that maybe this is a good time, like lots of cities are doing, to revisit their strategy for downtown. And that's why we've been working on this with Rebecca and the city for almost the past year now. So what are the conclusions that were reached here? Well, these are, again, we're not going to read them all, but pretty straightforward. We need to be broader than just a CBD. We need a mix of uses. Downtown needs to be thought of as a mix of different districts, each with their own identity, a more engaging public realm. Office space is vital, but not the only thing. Streets prioritized for pedestrians. This has come up over and over again. And we'll spend some time in a few minutes talking about that. And a number of other things, including focusing on what our existing anchors are. We do have strong anchors downtown, and we need to not overlook them or take them for granted. And we need to broaden our range of attractions and activity generators. So we sort of look at this as a three-legged stool, as an analogy. So the three main legs being tourism, office, and residential. And pre-pandemic, we were out of balance. There was much more focus on office. Now we're kind of out of balance in terms of tourism being a driver. Thank goodness it's a driver, it's come back. But it's still, we're not quite balanced. And to have a strong downtown, we need a strong base. The base needs to be office, tourism, residential. There are other components, arts and culture, eds and meds. The more legs of a stool we have, this is sort of a bad analogy, but the stronger that stool is. And that means if any one sector, like office now, is a little bit weaker, we still have a strong base to work off. And that stool, using that same analogy, needs to sit on a strong base. So if our streets are crumbling, as some of them are, then you've got a wobbly stool. So the goal really is to strengthen all of our legs and make sure we have a strong base for that to sit on. So our conclusions, again, we talked, oops, I went the wrong way, didn't I? So this led to a set of guiding principles. And guiding principles are important because they form the basis of what everything is evaluated against. So we came up with all of that input, and we're not going to read all these through, but there's a set of guiding principles, and this is sort of the summary of them. And these are not by any means sort of earth-shattering or even new. Lots of previous plans talked about being a more pedestrian-focused downtown, being more active, having a set of districts, but we haven't really followed that. And just like any set of principles, once you start making exceptions, then the set becomes less compelling. And if we're going to make investment from the public sector, from the private sector, we need to make sure that everything we do follows these principles and advances those principles. And if we stick to that, then over the next 10 years, we'll have a much stronger downtown. So, whoops, I went too far ahead. So we understand, again, that this is a long-term plan, long-term meaning 10 years out, but there are short-term issues that need to be addressed. And unless we address those short-term issues, those longer-term improvements are going to be much harder to do. So we know public safety, homelessness, returning office workers, all of these things are important. A number of people, oops, I'm going the wrong way. Number of people are working on that. The city's working on that. Rebecca is dealing with those short-term issues every day and most nights and weekends as well. There was a group put together during the pandemic of about 50 people that came up with a number of short-term recommendations that are being implemented to some extent. So people are working on those things. The two of the major issues, short-term, are dealing with our homeless challenges. And I think we've all come to the conclusion that the goal is not to just break up camps to break them up and move them from one place to the other, but really provide some longer-term strategies, most of which relate to the need for more transitional housing. And this is, in a sense, a win-win for downtown if we can help those people that are in need by providing initially transitional housing and ultimately getting them into permanent housing and provide services. That is a huge help to those people that need them. It also reduces the impact or the perceptions of safety or whatever it is in terms of downtown. So the downtown community really needs to support that initiative. And there's work moving along to provide more of that transitional housing, like the community care campus that the city is putting money into. Public safety, another challenge. Some of it is perception, some of it is real. We know that there are challenges with the police. We had a good meeting with the mayor last week or 2 weeks ago. The police department is a couple of hundred officers short in terms of filling vacancies. But nonetheless, there needs to be a greater police presence downtown. We need to see people, officers out on foot, on bikes, on horses. There need to be more ambassadors. Rebecca's team has increased the number of ambassadors. The mayor put more money into the budget this year. Humana put some money in to increase the number of ambassadors. The medical center has expanded the reach of the ambassadors to include LUMED. There is a new police headquarters under construction, which will help. Ultimately, we need a separate police district downtown. One of the challenges is that the downtown is not its own police district. So there are opportunities to work on public safety, which is very critical, and the mayor stressed how important that is to his administration in terms of making sure there's a greater presence downtown. And then another thing that sort of runs through all of the things we're talking about really is making sure that downtown is seen as a place of inclusion. We always talk about downtown being everybody's neighborhood. Sometimes that's true, sometimes it may not seem that way. Certainly after the racial protests during the pandemic, there was some concern, a lot of concern about how welcoming downtown is. There are lots of things we can do to make it more welcoming to all members of the community, and in fact, connect those things downtown. We'll talk about some of those in a minute. So the result of all this is that we do have a series of initiatives that we think make sense to drive this strategy over the next 10 years. And these dozen or so really kind of are grouped into three categories. One is focusing on downtown as a residential neighborhood. A second is reinforcing the public realm, the social infrastructure, the quality of place. And the third is activating downtown. We need, all that being said, we just need more people and more activity and more things happening downtown, not just from 9 to 5, but throughout the day, throughout the evening, and throughout the weekends as well. So let's start with residential. And there's a number of things that we can do or we can work on to increase the number of people living in and near downtown. So the first question was, is there a market? What's the market for downtown? Again, we engaged Zimmerman Volk Associates, and they have done work in Louisville before. Essentially, there's sort of three main markets for downtown housing. One is young singles and couples, one is empty nesters, and the third is families, whether they're traditional or non-traditional. What is their preference in terms of housing? Most people are interested in apartments. Condominiums have not been particularly strong in downtown. They're still not. Other types of housing, lower density, row houses, townhouses, attached, we'll talk about that in a minute. A pretty strong percentage is interested in those types of housing, which we don't have right now in and around downtown. The absorption, fairly modest. You know, we have fewer people living downtown than our competitor cities do, but it's getting better, and it's gotten better over the course of the last 10 or 15 years. And we're talking about 500 or 600 new units as an absorption rate, fairly conservative, that we can absorb so that in 5 years from now, we've got 2,000 or 3,000 more apartment units or residential units downtown. And this is a map that shows where our residential development is right now. And it's scattered throughout downtown. The clumps sort of in the east and west represent the major public housing redevelopments, Liberty Green on the east, Beecher Terrace on the west, some concentration around the Broadway area, which we'll talk about. So we're scattered. And we think there's three areas to focus on in terms of downtown housing. One is clearly we've got a lot of vacant sites. We've got a lot of buildings that are vacant or underutilized. If there's a market for housing, should there be an encouragement of those sites to be turned into housing? The answer is, of course, yes. A little bit more difficult downtown, in the heart of downtown, because of property values, being able to assemble them. Surface parking lots, unfortunately, are have been in the past pretty profitable. Very little operational costs, a lot of income. Less so now, so maybe there's more opportunities. One of the impacts of the tourism boom is that there is a lot more hotel development downtown, which is a good thing, but it also means that property values are being driven up because a hotel can pay more than a residential building can. So we need to focus on that. The second issue, and there's a lot of discussion about this, is converting office space to residential space. And the third is looking at the edges of downtown as these residential neighborhoods. Offices into housing, lots of discussion, lots of publicity, lots of cities are looking at it. We know that we have a lot of empty office space, more so than many of our competitor cities, not dramatically more so, but still more so. Turning those A-space buildings or modern office buildings into residential is very difficult for lots of reasons. And the goal for those buildings really should be to help them re-tenant those buildings as much as possible. City, the mayor has put in a significant amount of money to help those businesses, which is great. And hopefully over time, those buildings will fill up. So cities are looking at how they can encourage and incentivize buildings that do make sense to be converted to make those things happen. And what every city has found is that B and C space buildings, our older buildings, historic buildings, for a variety of reasons, are much more applicable for conversions into housing. We know downtown there's a number of those buildings. We have a lot more than some cities do. We have buildings that are either in the process of being looked at as conversions or about to be. But the more we can do to incentivize these types of buildings into residential developments is certainly worth prioritizing at the very highest level. So the third piece is if we go back to look at our existing residential map and look at where the clusters are, there's 3 or 4 clusters of housing around downtown. And again, in the heart of downtown, which is, the fewest, that building right in the middle is the Omni. Again, it's hard to, for a variety of reasons, hard to develop residential. And even if you do, they're kind of individual buildings. But if you look at the area south of Broadway, the area east of East Downtown, Main and Market, really up to Butchertown, which is, we think, an aged neighborhood, the area west, Russell and Shippingport, you do see clusters of these neighborhoods beginning to form. And because of land values and availability of land, there is the opportunity to really create more of these buildings, these areas as residential neighborhoods, as opposed to single buildings. And if you go back to the previous slide, this almost 40% of lower density housing, which can also mean more affordable housing, the ability to do these, what people call missing middle types of housing, has much more applicability to those edge neighborhoods of downtown than the heart of downtown. And we really like the fact that if we can expand the affordability and types of housing we have in and around downtown, we can make it more attractive for more people to live downtown. And we've seen examples, and you've all seen examples in other cities of different types of housing types and affordability and density, that these are, if you look at these are hard to think about in the middle of 4th Street, but thinking about them south of Broadway or west of 9th Street or east of Nulu, you begin to understand that these are opportunities that we should pursue. So we looked at a couple of areas in particular. One is Sobro, which is south of Broadway. Not everybody calls it Sobro. There is some housing already. The Brown Brothers Cadillac dealership is being converted into housing, and 800 building is a big building, but it's in Sobro. A lot of people living there. And if you look at vacant parcels, there are lots of opportunities to fill in that part of downtown. As a strong residential neighborhood. If you look at the western part of downtown, towards 9th Street and into Russell, same thing. The Greyhound site is being redeveloped into housing. The mud lot, which the city is putting out for RFP, is a perfect site for additional housing, a variety of housing types. And even as we go up towards Shippingport and to Portland, there's housing being developed right now in terms of new people wanting to live close to downtown, but not necessarily in downtown. And even Butchertown, again, which is not that far from downtown, has a variety of housing styles right now, variety of housing prices, single family, detached. The stadium site, the soccer stadium site, there's lots of land there that has been sort of master planned conceptually for a mix of uses, including housing. There's a couple of other large development tracts that could be housing. So if we think about these areas around downtown as neighborhoods with all of the amenities that a strong neighborhood has, neighborhood parks, a place to walk your dog, a place to get a cup of coffee, those things are certainly things we should focus on in and around downtown. The second sort of set of initiatives deal with the public realm. And by the public realm, we really mean the street and road network and sidewalks and all of that good stuff that is downtown. And if you were at the first public meeting, we talked about the Main Street. Most people, if we say, what's a great looking street? What's a street that really is prioritized for pedestrians rather than cars? Almost everybody talks about West Main Street. So West Main Street's the good. If you go one block just to the south of Main Street, you're on Market Street. Market Street is not good. Has none of those characteristics. And if you go one street north to River Road, it really gets intimidating. So we have a beautiful street, a good model, but for whatever reason, it hasn't been used as a prototype for other streets downtown. And our streets are still, so one example is we pay attention to Main Street. We landscape it, we have seating, we have lots of activities there. Here's Market Street, and this is not a staged photograph. I was walking down Market Street looking for a place to sit. The only place I found was this. Why it's there, I don't know. A meager attempt, perhaps, to provide some humanizing of Market Street. But we do have streets that are still primarily prioritized for cars. And the city as a policy has adopted for many years now the need to do complete streets, the need to do road diets, the need to include bike lanes, transit, making one-way streets into two-way streets. And there are a few examples in downtown on the books, but most of them are not downtown. And even the plans now for downtown streets like Jefferson and Muhammad Ali, the plans to make them more complete streets, make them two-way, slow down traffic, all the things that are important are outside of downtown. And we still sort of can't figure it out. And when we talk to people in the city, the response is that, well, you know, there's issues in terms of commuters going over the bridges, and if we make streets two-way and slow down traffic, there's going to be some congestion on 2nd Street now that more people go over the bridge because it's free. And, you know, the response is, that's not acceptable. You know, we shouldn't focus our streets for the 1 hour or the half an hour where people might have to slow down or sit at a traffic light for the 23 hours in the day when people who are downtown need to embrace those streets for themselves, for pedestrians, for bicycles, for transit connectors, which we need. So the model of West Main Street needs to be a model that the city embraces for all of its streets downtown. And as using that sort of the bad example of Market Street, so this is Market Street between 6th and 7th as it exists today. You know, 4 lanes of one-way traffic going pretty fast, 2 lanes of parking, not very much narrow sidewalks, not very many trees. You know, can we turn streets like Market Street? And this is just an example. It could be Market, Jefferson, Chestnut into complete streets that do have not just a bike lane thrown in, retrofitted, but basically an integrated system of bike lanes throughout downtown, places for transit, places for pedestrians, slower traffic, all of the things that I think most of us downtown would like to see downtown throughout the day. Then you begin to make our streets more humane and more inviting for people who are here every day. Curiously, when we talked to the Visitor Bureau, and they talked about their surveys of tourists, you know, bourbon tourists, but tourists in general, and you know, downtown is pretty positive in terms of the response. But one of the things that they said comes up all the time is that it's confusing if you're driving because of the one-way streets. Some of the streets they don't feel safe crossing because cars are going really fast. So it's not just people working or living downtown; it's people who are visiting as well. But making our streets, prioritize our streets for pedestrians is really important. And the city is starting to look at some of these things. Chestnut Street in the medical center, the city has money to begin the design to humanize Chestnut Street. This is Chestnut and Brook. The image on the right, your right, I guess, is the existing pretty awful environment. There are ways to humanize all of our streets downtown. River Road, a little bit more challenging for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is the interstate going above it. And the connection or the phase 4 of the Riverfront Park west of 9th Street, there is a plan in place to extend River Road and to make some improvements to the Riverwalk. It's basically taking 1 lane of the westbound traffic on River Road where it says River Road. That lane will go away, and the bike and ped path connecting the 2 parks will be expanded to include that area. That will slow down traffic. That's a good thing. It'll make the pedestrian path much more attractive. And once you get past 9th Street, that path will become very attractive for bicyclists and pedestrians. The existing path, the existing connection is still somewhat problematic. It'll be wider, there'll be more opportunity to improve it, but things like lighting and signage and banners and making River Road a gateway into downtown, which it is and should be, is not part of the existing plan. Secondly, the connections to the river from downtown, both in the heart of downtown, 6th, 7th, 8th Street, and in Russell, 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th Streets, is not part of that plan. And the city, the connections to get from the heart of downtown to the riverfront, this is your connection. This is not a doctored photograph. This is the connection to get across River Road to that bike pedway. And that will not change. There'll be one less lane, but these connections are just not something that's part of the existing plan. There have been plans and suggestions to improve those connections. Most of them require modest improvements. This needs to be an important part of the city's connection back to the river, because right now in the heart of downtown, it's pretty poor. We can figure out ways to get under the expressway, and then when we get to West Main, west of 9th Street, the same conditions exist. We'll have a wonderful West Waterfront Park, but the pedestrian connections from Russell, from Portland are pretty modest, to say the least. A lot of surface parking lots, and that's fine. Mercer is a major employer there, increasing and improving the look. Some of those parking lots and the fencing is very nice. Some of it still needs to be worked on, but we need to prioritize not just the fact that there's a park, but there are connections so that the people who need to use that and want to use that from downtown, from Russell, from Portland, can be welcomed to that new investment in the park. Curiously, one of the only places where we have a continuous flood wall is along Rowan Street in this area. Pretty intimidating, but as we've seen in other cities doing murals and using those flood walls as public art canvases can certainly work well in this part of the riverfront. So those are connections to the river. Connections from downtown to our other edge neighborhoods are also challenging, and we have three major downtown barriers: I-65, Broadway, and 9th Street. I-65 needs to be an area where we can more comfortably walk under it, basically, and connect these districts. So one way to do that is lighting. Here's one plan that comes out of Boston. Here's an approach that Rebecca's working on in terms of improving the lighting. Once the homeless encampments are dissipated and there's pedestrian improvements, the ability to move comfortably through I-90, across and through I-65 becomes less of a barrier. City and LUMED are now working on a grant proposal to actually look at those things in more detail on those underpasses that connect the medical center to downtown. So we're moving on that, but we need to spend more time on that. Similarly, there's a new planning effort to improve Broadway all the way from West Louisville to the Highlands, comes through downtown. A lot of focus on east-west improvements, particularly transit, but the connections from Sobro, from Smoketown to downtown, making it an attractive and easy place to walk across is really important. And this next phase, which is just starting, really needs to focus on the pedestrian improvements so that Broadway becomes less of a barrier and more of a connector. And East Broadway itself is also not the most attractive gateway into downtown. There's a lot of focus at Paristown, which is a great project, but connecting Paristown to downtown through East Broadway is important. This area right at Barrett and Broadway is an area of focus. There's a group of people sitting right here working on the historic Epping district to make that a destination and an activity generator. And as the Broadway plan moves forward, making that connection from East Broadway into downtown is also important. 9th Street Divide, we talk about 9th Street all the time. There is a plan to reimagine 9th Street, which is moving to construction, I think, in the next year. Making that connection, though, across 9th Street in a variety of ways is really important. And again, we'll talk about a couple of other ways to do that. So then the next thing we really want to talk about is the open space network downtown. And unlike other cities like Cincinnati and Indianapolis, where there's a major downtown gathering space, open space, we don't have that. We have the Waterfront Park, which is not in the heart of downtown. We've got the Belvedere, which is on one end of downtown. We don't have a central gathering space. but we do have a series of smaller, sort of well-sized spaces at good intervals, really from Muhammad Ali all the way up to the river, that can be activated and should be activated in a way that creates a network. And part of this came out of the Bingham Fellows initiative called City Spots. Some of you here may be part of that looked at a dozen or so of these small underutilized spaces throughout downtown and looked at ways to activate them in terms of places to eat, places to relax, places to play, make them more interesting spaces throughout downtown. So we have looked at that sort of as a base, and the graphic on the right really looks at those spaces as a connected, an integrated network of spaces, so that every block or so there's another public space, some publicly owned, some privately owned, some owned by nonprofits, that if they were each activated in their own way, creates this downtown network, this sort of emerald necklace, if you will, throughout downtown. Some of those spaces are already being revitalized or reimagined. This is Founders Square, the Traeger Microforest Project as part of Louisville. City Spots, as we just mentioned, the first one was done just a few weeks ago on the side of the courthouse. The KCA is in the process of looking at making some structural improvements to their steps in front. And we said, this is a great space. It's a beautifully proportioned space. When there is a programmed activity, it's a great space for people to be there and to see what's happening in terms of a program. But most days, it looks like this. It's pretty empty. Are there ways to modestly improve that space through lighting, through greenery, through planters, through seating, that sort of turns that space into something like this? And these spaces that have steps and have sort of nice proportions are places that attract people, and if they're well programmed, can become another place that makes downtown interesting and a place that you want to be. If you think about all of these spaces as a network, then you have interesting spaces scattered throughout downtown at pretty good intervals. Again, some of these spaces are public, some of them are private. They don't require a lot of major capital improvements, some tables and chairs, some umbrellas, places where there's a green canopy of shade. I can't tell you how important that is in terms of activation of use. Some of the private spaces like the PNC Plaza are being looked at in terms of these concepts. So can we look at these over a period of years, doesn't have to all happen at once, where you have improvements to create a nice network of spaces. And perhaps there's a way to introduce public art as part of those things, where every space has a piece of public art, and more importantly, the creation of that space, that piece of art, becomes an activity of that space. If you've been to Indianapolis on their cultural trail, every regular interval, there's a different piece of public art that's been included there over the course of a number of years, and it just brings that all alive. Belvedere is again a big space. There's sort of two big spaces downtown. Belvedere is a big space that's always been problematic in terms of how to activate it. It is sort of a dead end, and while it overlooks the riverfront, the connections are difficult to say the least. When there's an event up there, it's very active, but most days it looks like this. The mayor has really taken this as an initiative of his administration, and just last week announced that they've hired a firm to look at reimagining the Belvedere. Jefferson Square, this is titled wrong, I'm not sure why, but is another important space downtown, took on more importance because of its central location during the racial protests. It's also a place of commemorization for first responders. So revitalizing that space is going to take some care and some collaboration with groups that perhaps in the past have not collaborated with each other. But it's a good opportunity to get people working together for a common goal. And then there are places that we kind of call the hidden gems of downtown, sort of back spaces. This is Washington Street behind Whiskey Alley. not very well utilized for vehicles, mostly loading. But some of the restaurants and hotels have begun to open up into that back area on Washington Street. And the concept of turning Washington Street into Whiskey Alley, which is mostly a pedestrian zone, is something that is very doable. The property owners are interested in doing that and can be a real example of turning a formerly desolate space into a very active pedestrian space. The final point here on this section really deals with, oops, gone the wrong way, deals with our sidewalks. So, oops, during the pandemic, lots of cities experimented with getting more people, more restaurants to open up into outdoor spaces, sometimes on the sidewalks, sometimes on the streets, lots of innovation. Not so much in Louisville for a number of reasons. Some of these interventions are fairly modest, taking a couple of parking spaces. Some are a little bit more involved, but it's really designed to bring more people out on the street every day. Every time when there's activity downtown, bringing people outside so you can see it. We have a couple of good examples of that, not too many. Whiskey Alley being one of them. And if you walk along that street, even when there's no people out there, it just seems more active because there is this activity that spills out. We have spaces downtown that could have that. This is the image on the left is 4th Street, lots of restaurants, big wide sidewalks, no outdoor activity. The right is 5th Street, 3 lanes of traffic. We don't need 3 lanes of traffic. A fairly narrow sidewalk, lots of restaurants. That sidewalk could be expanded, or we could use one of the lanes to activate those streets. We have opportunities that we haven't utilized. And even on Main Street, West Main Street, part of the reason to expand the sidewalk was to encourage outdoor dining. And before the pandemic, we had a number of restaurants that had outdoor spaces. The restaurants have either gone away or those outdoor spaces have gone away. But we need to actively encourage that. And we've heard that city makes it hard in terms of regulations. Maybe that's true, maybe that's not, but we need to actively help these restaurants. They need help anyway, helping them financially, helping them ease the regulatory maze, encouraging them to spill out is really important. The last thing I want to talk about is activating downtown. And again, all of those other things are fine, but we just need to drive more activity into our downtown. We have a downtown that traditionally has been defined as the central business district. And interestingly, when we went back, we found that starting in at least 1929, if not earlier, we defined our central business district, our central congested district at that point, with these boundaries. And it hasn't changed in 100 years, okay? That's still sort of what we think about as our downtown central business district. But if you think about, I'm going the wrong way here, excuse me. If we think about downtown, not just as the central business district, but a series of districts that include a business district, but also look at different parts of downtown and the edges of downtown as their own unique districts with their own character, with their own activity generation, with their own branding, then downtown becomes much more active and much more interactive. And there are parts of downtown that pre-pandemic, post-pandemic are still very active. Butchertown, the Waterfront Park, West Main Street, Nulu, 4th Street, Medical Center, Whiskey Alley. These are all areas that have an identity. And people come down, people say, I'm coming to Whiskey Alley, or I'm coming to Nulu, or I'm coming to Glassworks. And those areas need to be better connected than they are right now. There's parts of downtown, particularly the western part of downtown, where we don't have that much activation right now. These are the areas that tend to be the most forlorn, the most empty of people, places where public safety is more of a concern because there's a lack of activity. So how do we activate these areas and these districts so that they have their own identity and character. City is trying to help. They have put out a set of RFPs for underutilized property that they have. The Civic Center area, which is the area behind Metro Hall and City Hall, is one of them, is in this district. The Mudlot adjoining 9th Street is another one. So the city is trying to activate those areas and provide catalysts for development and activity. This is the four pieces of the property behind Metro Hall. The city is moving its police headquarters to the old AT&T building, which is a good thing in terms of more police presence downtown, but it's a 5-acre tract. So in addition to the police headquarters, the parks, the spaces around that, how could they be activated? So it's not just a place of police cruisers sitting there, but a place that activates and at the same time provides many more eyes on the street in terms of public safety. The Gardens has been empty for a while. Lots of initiatives in the past that have fallen through. The current one, which is very exciting, about turning it into a film studio, would be great. The investors are doing their due diligence now, and hopefully this will come to fruition and activate the Gardens. Fifth and Ali, across from the Gardens, is also an area that U of L is making an investment in by redeveloping it into the Environment Institute. Lots of different things that will have this become an anchor for this part of downtown. And it also leads to the beginning of Muhammad Ali going west, which was at one time Walnut Street and was the commercial and entertainment hub of the African American community in Louisville. And in past, there have been efforts to reinvigorate this part of Ali to highlight and celebrate that heritage that it had and use it as a way to lessen the 9th Street divide and connect downtown to Russell and parts west in the West End. Good plans, good possibility of infill throughout that corridor. Sort of not much activation, to be honest, since those plans were done a few years ago. This is an important element in terms of reconnecting not only the west part of downtown with activity, but connecting it to the west end of downtown. And then one of the other things we mentioned earlier is to not forget about the anchors that we have downtown. We do have strong anchors, and they need to be supported, needs to be expanded and reinvested in. LUMED, you've probably heard in the last couple of years, the medical institutions and JCTC have come together to really rebrand that district and to refocus activity in the medical center. There was a development plan that we helped put together last year. A number of those things are moving forward. Each of those partners are making major investments themselves in that area. JCTC, a major redesign of their campus, the new master plan of the U of L's Health Sciences campus has just been released. Major addition to U of L Hospital, about $500 million of reinvestment in the medical center area. Think about that. However, the public realm, the streets, the open spaces, the spaces that the city controls have not been reinvested in for quite some time. The Greenberg administration has committed to redoing that. They've put money in to begin to make some of those improvements. There was an old correctional facility. Why it was in the middle of the medical center, we're not sure. But it has been vacant for a while. The city is going to tear that building down and turn it over to LUMED to build as a new open space, which is much needed in the medical center. And U of L, in addition to being in the medical center, has a major presence downtown. They now have 4 locations downtown: the Health Science Campus, the Environment Institute, the Nichols Technology Center on the other side of, north side of 65. They just were given the 515 building down Washington Street. And if you look at, we met with the university president last week and called this sort of the 4 corners offense of downtown Louisville. Louisville has a major presence. And if we can better connect these 4 areas and bring more students and bring more activity from U of L into downtown, it becomes much more of a driver. President Schatzel is very committed to this. She even has committed to spending 1 week a month at the downtown campus, which is remarkable for U of L president. So having U of L as a major anchor of downtown is really important. And not just U of L. There are a number of educational institutions pretty much clustered in the southern part of downtown. And if you look at the U of L, JCTC, the Brown School, the Francis Parker School, Spalding, and even just further south, Simmons, that group of institutions represent students, represent faculty, represent staff, and almost every vibrant downtown that we can think of has a university or educational presence where those people are not just coming there to study, but they're using downtown as their laboratory. And we need to really make sure that those institutions are supported, that we make those areas safe for their students, but also encourage them to spill out and become a more active part of downtown. And our arts community is, again, very, very significant, very important, often overlooked or taken for granted. Looking at ways to get those activities spilling out into downtown on a daily basis should be a high priority. And when we talk about our assets of downtown or assets of Louisville, obviously the Kentucky Derby is a major asset, major unique feature. We talk about Bourbon, we talk about Ali, we talk about Louisville Slugger, but the Derby really has never had much of a presence downtown. And now with the opening December 6th, I believe, of Derby City Gaming, we can have a much more visible presence of Kentucky Derby Churchill Downs in downtown, which is what people would like to see, and we now have a new opportunity, which is great. So that leads us to Bourbon. And thank goodness for Bourbon in terms of downtown. Certainly the bourbon industry and the tourist industry has responded to the post-pandemic in ways that are even stronger than they were before. People know about Louisville as a center of bourbon. Most of that's focused downtown. That's great. How can we expand that? How can we expand that creativity, that interest, that uniqueness of Louisville in our downtown? And we've begun to expand the bourbon experience to include other things, including food. And not just bourbon, but Louisville has become nationally known, is becoming nationally known, or more nationally known, as a center for food, creativity in food, Southern food, bourbon-related food, whatever. We're becoming known as a food city. A lot of that stuff's happening in the neighborhoods, not so much a downtown presence. Is there a way to combine the bourbon experience with the food experience, whether it's a performance kitchen where we have demonstrations of bourbon foods or making cocktails or other types of creativity in downtown. And when we think about one of the guiding principles that we heard was downtown as a center of culture, innovation, and creativity. So what are the elements of creativity and innovation that we're most proud of in the city? We're proud of bourbon. We're becoming more proud of food. We even in Bourbon, just south of downtown is Moonshine University and Flavor Mail, lots of creative things happening in terms of branding and blending and learning about that. How can we improve the experience so that we're bringing more people, more activity, more music? We need more music downtown, into downtown. In addition to food and bourbon, we have other creative activities downtown or in the city. GE's First Build, there's lots of really interesting things happening there in terms of products and robotics and things. GE itself, the fact that the appliance division is still here and is doing interesting things, both in terms of new types of appliances, new things that relate specifically to the food industry. Can we couch all of that in terms of creativity in our city, unleash that creativity, unlock that innovation, and center that in downtown? So one suggestion is that we find a space downtown. This is an example using the what was known as the Aegon Plaza, which is publicly owned, although maintained privately, where Panera used to be, and the Four Fountains are. It's across from the convention center. Can we turn this, or a space like this, into a downtown creativity center, where we do have creative foods, we do have creative bourbon, we have places to train the food industry, we have a performance kitchen, we have music, we have outdoor seating, we have pavilions for pop-ups and food trucks, a place that becomes an activity generator for all of downtown, whether you're a bourbon enthusiast or not, but really does highlight the city as a place of creativity and innovation and center it somewhere in the downtown area. There are lots of suggestions or prototypes of what those spaces could look like. Again, informal places to come and sit and eat and listen to music and to be active. Certainly, if there's any place that could be active 24/7, this would be the kind of place it is. So if we come back to take all of those things and come back to our guiding principles, can we, over the next 10 years, develop a downtown that is welcoming, that is pedestrian focused, that's a series of unique neighborhoods, that's active, that's green, that's a center of culture and innovation, that's a good neighbor, and that downtown becomes an economic driver, not just for downtown, but for the city as a whole? We believe that the possibilities are very strong, even though we have some current challenges to overcome, and that this is an approach that we suggest becomes the guiding driver for our downtown strategy over the next 10 years. Oops, and I believe finally I'm done.